All right, welcome to Chapter 6. We're going to be covering confidentiality and privacy along with HIPAA. There's some court cases that you should know about pertaining to these concepts as well. And we'll be touching on different forms of abuse where counselors will probably, and helpers, will come across during their career. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of learning confidentiality and privacy. Even being in the helping field for 10 years, there are still situations, issues that arise where I have to seek consultation myself with our human resource department or my supervisor. There's just no one answer to fit all situations, and you'll come across so many different scenarios and situations, and it's very important that you ask before you assume. Assuming you know the answer when in fact you don't can get you in a heap of trouble. So keep that in mind as you move forward in your schooling and your career. You're going to hear a lot in your schooling about the importance of confidentiality. So here are some key terms that you can take a look at. This chapter is another kind of lengthy chapter, but it's all very useful, good information, and it's very pertinent to what you'll be doing. All right, so confidentiality, what is it? Why is it important? In this country, we value people's privacy as their right, and that also plays out in the court system as well. And so there are several laws that have been passed to help support people and their right to confidential treatment. We look at privileged communication. It's a legal concept, and it basically says that only certain scenarios allow for therapists or helpers to share communication about their client in more of a public setting like a courtroom. And so there are laws that govern that as well. All right. Mandatory reporting is something that you will come across as well, especially in some of your classes here at NTC, such as Introduction to Counseling. Part of one of the assignments is to complete transcripts, and you have to do mock interviews with a client, and those mock interviews you have to explain HIPAA and mandated reporting. So mandated reporting it's designed to encourage therapists to report suspected cases of child, elder, and dependent abuse. And so when we come across those, then we are required to notify the proper authorities. You'll also hear a lot about HIPAA, right? HIPAA is discussed at length in your chapter as well. It passed in 1996, and it's designed to encourage electronic transactions and requires certain new safeguards to protect the security and confidentiality of health information. So we are required to keep everything confidential. People can only know about your client and what you're doing with your client on a need-to-know basis. All right, so if I'm a clinician working with a client, and a scenario arose where he or she is attending going somewhere else in the community, another resource, and I want to find out information about how that person is interacting with others and how pro-social they're being, I have to have a consent for them to sign that allows me to contact that resource. So any place that, if I'm working with a client, any place that I want to gain information about that client, they need to sign a release allowing me to do so. All right, and it's the same thing with spouses of the clients, with parents of a legal adult. We can't just give information to these people, no matter how close they are or how they're linked in their family. We always have to have releases signed. right. You can read about covered entity. Duty to warn is the mental health professional's responsibility, and it's to inform a potential victim when a client makes a threatening statement about wanting to harm him or her. And so it's a responsibility to notify that potential victim as well as notify the proper authorities. All right, same thing with duty to protect. If a client is expressing the desire to hurt himself or herself, it's important that we take appropriate steps to ensure that doesn't happen by contacting 911. And there's a discussion in this chapter regarding suicide and how you handle someone with suicidal ideations. It's very important to go through training. Most places, especially in the clinical world, will have trainings on how to deal with the potential suicidal client and suicide prevention. So you want to know how to determine whether a client may be at risk for attempting suicide. You want to assess each new client for suicidal thoughts. And it's very important as well. Keep up to date with current research, theory, and practice regarding suicide prevention. And you want to work with the suicidal client to create a supportive environment. Right? So it's important that we're very aware when a client makes statements, and we can't just kind of shrug them off. There are some court cases here as well that you can read about in the chapter. Tarasov case holding that a therapist has a duty to warn an intended victim of a client who poses a serious threat to do harm. All right, so it's the duty to warn. The Bradley case. All right, that's the responsibility of the therapist to not release a dangerous client from a psychiatric facility. That may or may not pertain to you in your career, but it's good to know. The Jablonski case, right, underscores the duty to commit a dangerous individual. Some of these, unless you're working in psychotherapy, you're not going to really come in contact with these rulings. The Headland case, the Jaffe case, you can read about those in the chapter. I want to touch on abuse before I close out here. That there's all kinds of different abuse, and abuse doesn't just come in the form of physical abuse, as a lot of people understand it, such as a domestic violence type of situation. There are many situations where there's sexual abuse in a relationship, there's psychological or emotional abuse. And so psychological or emotional abuse, it's something along the lines of, calling, let's say, a husband is emotionally abusing his wife and calling her names, saying that she's worthless, that she doesn't know how to do anything, and that's just consistent every day. That's going to wear on your psyche, and it's very dangerous. It's just as bad as physical abuse. And so we have to be aware of the signs for that as well. Also, we have neglect. And so that's when the failure of caregivers to fulfill their responsibilities to a child or an elderly person or another type of dependent adult. And then abandonment is just basically the desertion. When we desert our clients, like an elderly person, desertion of an elderly person by a person who has assumed responsibility for being a caregiver. So once we get into that role of being the caregiver, we have accountability and responsibility in that role. All right, and then financial material exploitation, and you can read about this more in your chapter as well. There's a lot of great case studies outlined in there. The illegal or improper use of an elder's funds, property, or assets. You see that, unfortunately, in the senior living homes with family members. It tends to happen a lot between family members. So a lot of good information in this chapter. Take your time going through it. Make sure you understand it. Reach out to me if you have questions, or go on the Q&A section of the discussion board, because this is this is something that is going to carry with you for your entire career, no matter if you're in counseling, if you're in nursing, or some other type of helping field. Confidentiality, privacy, being able to determine suicidal signs, being able to understand the different types of abuse and looking for the signs of that, learning about HIPAA, all that stuff is going to be very important. So, all right, we'll see you on the next one.